all big data comes from the same place. It comes from the past, okay? And I don't think you can significantly innovate or even differentiate without an act of, a leap of the imagination of some kind. I'm not an expert in conjoint analysis, and I don't have the maths to be one, but what has always interested me about it is the multidimensionality of it, which is, if you're not careful, people will tend to research one of two variables on the assumption that those are the two things that are decisively important. And this actually allows us, in two ways actually, you get the multidimensionality of product features and the multidimensionality of consumers. In other words, it can actually start to generate your own segmentation. So it's not just a question of how people on average respond to different product attributes and different weightings of those attributes. That's of course inherently useful in itself, but there's what you might call the second order benefit, which is you go, hold on a second, there is this small group of people who care massively about this. That's now an opportunity for adding a new service layer or perhaps even a new product. I think it's fascinating. If we demand that the only way of arriving at an interesting idea is through a process of sequential logic, we would have actually be living in a world where there'd be no penicillin, okay? There'd be no Viagra, no one would have discovered gravity. But more important, no, less important, okay, I was joking, okay, there wouldn't be an iPhone, there wouldn't be any Dyson vacuum cleaners. And the simple reason was, before those products existed, there was zero evidence of demand for them. Now, what you've got, I think, in being able to do rapid conjoint analysis is you therefore have an affordable experimental space where you can hypothesize inexpensively things that consumers might want, okay, without needing them to exist in the first place. But it's worth noting, Red Bull, you know, a lot of the big successes, true of Coca-Cola back in the day, okay, there was no evidence before those things existed that there was a consumer demand for them. And everybody quotes the famous Henry Ford, if I'd asked the consumer what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse, okay? But I mean, I would love to see conjoint analysis used. In fact, I'm going to suggest it is used in things like drone delivery. What would make consumers accept drone delivery over their gardens occasionally, for instance, because there are lots of technologies out there where the obstacle now is no longer technological, it's psychological. And finding out what the key is to unlock that problem. Indeed, what would make people happy to fly in a pilotless drone? Because at the moment, are they going to be terrified? Is there something that would make them feel completely reassured about it? Is there a particular data point which would prove decisive? Is there a particular design feature which would change the game? Okay, and the ability then, at the moment, AI is billions are being spent on this without, I would say, without 0.0001% of the investment being spent on what consumers really want from it. And you know, I've made the point before that no one's really asked the fundamental question, which is, in what kind of interface would consumers most like to interact with this technology? Is it voice, visual, textual, mixture of all three? You know, is it anime? Okay, is it a computer gaming environment? It could, because after all, the most sophisticated interface in many ways is a really advanced, 3D computer game. You know, multiplayer game is an extraordinarily sophisticated, that's probably the most immersive thing with headphones. Nobody's asking that question. They're optimizing for things that impress their fellow nerds, but they're not actually saying, ultimately we'll need people to pay for this and willingly adopt it. How would they like to consume it? It's a bit like saying, you know, if you produce a fantastic meal but you sell it in a restaurant that smells of sewage, no one will enjoy the experience. And if you get the context wrong, it doesn't matter how good the actual intrinsic qualities are of what you sell. If you've got the context wrong, if you've miscontextualized it, no one will play.